Hey, sorry about that, y'all. A little technical issue, but we're ready to go now. DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Hope you had a great weekend. Boy, I did. A beautiful weather, good times, and ready to go here on a Monday. A lot of recruiting talking today's show. Chip Tower's going to be here. Update on our DawgNation appreciation. You know the drill. You've been here for a while. We're glad you're with us today, too, as DawgNation Daily begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I got a lot of feedback about Friday's show, and frankly, a lot of it did not come from Georgia fans, which I guess I'll never really understand. I mean, listen, here on DawgNation Daily, we make no bones about the fact we are the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. I do SEC Country Live in the afternoons. That's for everybody. DawgNation Daily is, for the most part, only intended for Georgia fans. You know, we do have some fans of other schools that sometimes watch or listen to the show, and I hear from some of them in sort of a good-natured way. They say, I like keeping up with what's going on in the rest of the SEC. That totally makes sense to me. I'm completely on board with that. I do some of the same kind of stuff myself. I like knowing what other people are doing around the SEC, what's being said around the SEC. But there's always this sort of fragment of college football fans that seem to sort of occasionally gravitate towards DawgNation Daily, and they sort of only do it seemingly because it makes them mad. Those are the people that I don't quite get. Like, if you hate Georgia, why would you listen to DawgNation Daily? I mean, if you can't stand to hear anyone talk about Georgia, why would you care what we're saying here on a DawgNation Daily? But we talked on Friday about what I thought was a little bit of excuse-making on the part of Nick Saban. You know, maybe a little whiny. At times, Saban kind of comes across that way. We'll have more on that later on in the show, I guess. But a little bit of excuse-making about, we lost a bunch of coaches. That hurt us for the 2018 class. And, if it hadn't been for that, Alabama would have been number one in recruiting the way they always have been. That's at least Saban's perspective on this. And, maybe to a Georgia fan, it almost seems like discounting the work that Kirby Smart did towards the 2018 recruiting class. Of course, the dark cloud that hangs all of this over all this for Georgia is, yes, indeed, Alabama did beat Georgia on the field in January, but Georgia's been beating Alabama in recruiting ever since then. Now, the Alabama fan says, hey, that's short-lived. Alabama may have lost the race for the number one class in 2018, but you just watch out for 2019. And Georgia says, you know what? We are ready to watch out for 2019. A lot of Georgia fans are saying we are ready to see how this class comes together for the Bulldogs, because I think there's a lot of folks who listen and watch this show every single day who think that what Georgia did in recruiting for 2018, what it did in 2017, just the precursor to what may be the big haul coming in for 2019. And so whatever excuse that Nick Saban made about the 2018 class, he may have to come up with a whole new batch of excuses to make sense of the 2019 class, because we here on this show don't believe that Georgia's going anywhere from a recruiting standpoint. And with that in mind, when Jeff Sintel joined us on DawgNation Daily on Friday, it was kind of going into what was going to be a big recruiting weekend for Georgia. We'll also have more on that coming up in a moment. But Jeff kind of laid out, and he didn't set out to do this, but just in the midst of talking, he said, hey, here's what I think the big three priorities are for Georgia when it comes to a 2019 class. And I sort of jotted my notes down when he said that, because, something about the way that Jeff said this so succinctly and kind of, I thought he kind of worded it pretty perfectly. I thought it was sort of a pretty good way for us to start the week here when we start thinking about the 2019, recruiting cycle. And throughout the spring and summer, there's going to be a lot of this 2019 news that starts to break. Here is what Jeff Sintel sort of looks at as Georgia's top three priorities for kind of how this class comes together in 2019. Here is Jeff from Friday. You may have missed this. He didn't make a big point about it, but I thought it was pretty interesting nonetheless.
I think there's really three key areas that Georgia needs to address in 2019. I would kind of rank them as defensive tackle, inside linebacker, safety, and then quarterback. That's what I think that they really need to get accomplished with this class, especially depth-wise going forward, when you consider Georgia's already got 2 5-star receivers committed. I think those are the big needs.
So I think what Jeff says there is really interesting. Now, I like how he says that at the end. If you want to look at like on-field production, what's the one area in which Georgia may not be elite in 2018? Wide receiver may be the area in which Georgia on the field in 2018 is not elite. So the average sort of mainstream fan may say, well, that's obviously going to be Georgia's biggest recruiting need. But when you think about what Georgia's already got in the way of commitments from Jaden Hazelwood, and I don't care how many visits Hazelwood takes other places, he can travel to a different school every weekend for all I care. I believe that Hazelwood's still going to end up at Georgia. He is obviously fond of taking visits, but I think that Hazelwood's all dog. In fact, he pretty well told us that when he did the Marlowe's appearance with us a few weeks ago. Same thing for Dominic Blaylock, who is about as all dog as you can be. He is he's very much locked down to Georgia. These are essentially the two top receivers in the country for 2019. So with Georgia addressing that need with those two guys, other needs kind of come to the forefront. And, I, for the most part, agree with everything that Jeff Sintel says right there. He mentions defensive tackle, mentions inside linebacker, mentions safety. I do think those are the true, real priorities for Georgia. And I'll start with the defensive tackle side of this things for a moment because and we'll talk more about Tramel Walthour and Jordan Davis throughout the week here on DawgNation Daily. There's a point I want to make about them specifically coming up in a day or two here, but we know in terms of really grabbing that elite 4- and 5-star name, that's the one thing that Georgia really hasn't done a lot with the 2018 class, hasn't done with the 2017 class. You have to go back to 2016, to find Georgia really reaching in and grabbing an elite defensive tackle. Obviously, Trent Thompson is gone from Georgia now. He's moving on to the NFL, and you have to think about, who's next in line for him. On the field, this is an area in which Georgia's probably going to be fine in 2018. But, when you start thinking about, use the word that Jeff Sintel used, a word like depth, this is one of those things where all of a sudden your depth gets a little thin if you don't address this in a big way in 2019. And my guess is Georgia's going to be able to do that, partially because, Kirby Smart's not going to leave a need unmet, but also because, as luck would have it, 2018 may have been a fairly weak year for defensive tackles in the state of Georgia. Looks like 2019 is kind of moving back in the other direction there. So that's good news on that front. Then you get to inside linebacker. And, this is one of those areas, and Jeff brought up the inside linebacker position a moment ago. Obviously, Georgia took sort of big steps towards that. Tresmond Marshall, Owen Popo visiting Georgia. Those are guys that could, in a big way, fill in that spot and, kind of become that, that maybe that next Roquan Smith for Georgia. Certainly in the case of Owen Popo, that's the phrase that gets thrown around with him a lot. The same thing with Channing Tindall from this 2018 class. Hey, maybe Tindall could step in. Maybe he could be the next Roquan Smith. We're going to talk to Chip Towers about this when he joins us in a little bit here on DawgNation Daily. The challenge of labeling anybody the next Roquan Smith, and those of you that watch this show or listen to this show every day, you understand this. The challenge of labeling anybody as the next Roquan Smith is tough, given just how dominant Roquan Smith was here in 2017. I mean, the number that I always kind of come back to when it comes to Roquan, you look at the tackles for loss, you can look at the speed in which we played the game. This is a guy who made like 85 solo tackles for Georgia in 2017. That's 85 tackles in which he brought the guy to the ground and didn't have another Georgia player did not have a hand on the ball carrier. That's 85 stops essentially that somebody else is going to have to replace. And if Roquan's not there to make those stops in 2017, what's different about the Georgia defense? Well, we don't know for sure. That's obviously a hypothetical that's tough to answer. But what we do know is that's at least some additional yardage for the team that Georgia was playing. And think about those close, razor-thin games like Notre Dame and Oklahoma and, maybe, other moments, SEC championship game in the early going there. Think about those extra yards and how that could have changed the tone and tenor of those games. So, yeah, inside linebacker, huge need for Georgia. But, man, easier said than done. And when you find, a guy that's competed and played at the level that Roquan Smith has played. And then safety, that Jeff Sintel mentioned a moment ago, that is also one of those things that I am really looking forward to seeing how this plays out on the field in 2018 with a couple guys in particular here. Richard LeCount, first of all, who was the leader for Georgia in its 2017 class. And the assumption here is when you lead and sort of become a Pied Piper in recruiting, can you also then do the same thing on the field? Can you also command the same level of respect between the white lines that you commanded leading up to National Signing Day in February of 2017? My belief for LeCount is I believe that he can be. I believe that he's going to be an outstanding player. And in 2018, we may see that start to take shape for him at that safety position for Georgia, at least on the field a lot. Does it change the fact that it's still a need for Georgia in its 2019 class? But Jeff mentioning safety being a big position of need, I think only puts more emphasis on what Richard LeCount's going to do on the field in 2018. I'd probably say the same thing about D'Angelo Gibbs as well, whose status is a lot more uncertain, obviously, than guys like LeCount. But I'm still optimistic when it comes to Gibbs that, whatever's been going on with him, that's going to be taken care of. He's going to be ready to go here. We're going to see him back in classes soon and not practicing with Georgia during the spring, but practicing, in the summer leading up to the fall nonetheless. So the overall takeaway for me is, and, Jeff mentions quarterback. We'll sort of save that for another time. But in terms of the real positions of need when it comes to 2019 recruiting, completely agree with Jeff. I think it is safety. I think it is inside linebacker. I think it is defensive tackle. I am looking forward to seeing how those needs get met here coming up in 2019. But I'm also really curious about on the field in 2018, how the players who have a chance to grow and develop, how that takes shape to maybe change and take some of the pressure off what happens in 2019. But the overall bottom line is, Alabama saw Georgia leap ahead of it in 2018 recruiting. My guess is the same thing could happen in 2019 as well, because Georgia has some needs, and one of the things we've seen from Kirby Smart, he's very good at filling those needs when it comes to the recruiting trail. I think we'll see that happen once again this December and into February as well. My name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. It is great to have you with us here on a Monday, whether you be watching us on video, on a Facebook Live. Had a little technical issue, a little late getting started today, but we certainly appreciate you being with us here on a Facebook Live. We're there for you at 10 a.m. each and every Monday through Friday on the DawgNation Facebook page, on the radio at noon, on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and in podcast form, iTunes, SoundCloud, wherever podcasts can be found. And I said something the other day on the show about taking better care of our Android users, and I've heard back from a lot of you that said, hey, I don't know what you're talking about. My Android experience is fine. Well, that's great to know. Maybe leaving well enough alone is the best way to do that. I think the way that I'm going to alter what I said about Android users the other day for the podcast is I think I'm going to try to find a way, and I think I have a good way to sort of provide some outreach for maybe new Android users. I meet people, every single day, every single week who just started listening to DawgNation Daily for the first time. And so we want to make it as easy for new people to find as possible. And so I think I may have an idea about that. I also may have just no idea what I'm talking about. And based on what I've heard from some of my Android user friends here to DawgNation Daily, that may indeed be the case. Nonetheless, whether you listen to the podcast, listen to us on the radio in Athens, watch us on video every single day, we hope you make plans to be with us Thursday, March 15th for our very first ever DawgNation Appreciation. And if you heard Sonny Michel on DawgNation Daily last week, that's a real taste of what it's going to be like on Thursday, March 15th, plus the terrific letter he wrote in the Players Tribune. That's also kind of a precursor for the conversation we're going to have there that night. Thursday, March 15th, the Coca-Cola Roxy Theater. Our special guests, as I said, Nick Chubb, Sonny Michel, Roquan Smith. It's going to be like a big multimedia presentation with them on stage, looking back over the 2017 season, everything that happened there, their thoughts on that. We've got some surprises as well, some fun that's going to be going down. I love what I was able to tell you about on Friday, that in addition to kind of everything else, we're also going to announce that night a winner of a pair of tickets to every game in Athens this upcoming fall. How cool is that? Maybe another reason to enjoy the fun and festivities of the DawgNation Appreciation, announcing a big winner there for a pair of tickets to every game played in Athens this fall. So that's going to be a lot of fun and a great add-on to what's already going to be a great night, DawgNation Appreciation. Because the truth is, the phrase DawgNation Appreciation, I think, really takes on a couple different, identities here, definitions. On the one hand, we want to show appreciation to, Chubb and Roquan and Sony for the great careers they had at Georgia, but it's also a chance for DawgNation, I mean the website here for a moment, for DawgNation Daily, to show appreciation to all of you who've made it such a great year for us. So that's a lot of what's going to go down on Thursday, March 15th. As the days continue, we're going to be announcing more and more aspects of it. But you want to go to DawgNation.com to get your tickets. There's a tab right there on the top of the homepage. You can check that out. DawgNation.com. Tickets for the DawgNation Appreciation. I understand there are still some premium tickets left, which do include autograph opportunities from either Nick Chubb, Sonny Michel, or Roquan Smith. So please get those. General admission tickets also start at just $49. We got Chip Towers coming up in a moment. Let me talk a little bit more recruiting, though, before we get to Chip. And there was something that Kirby Smart said on signing day that I love. He was asked about the notion of, hey, were you sweating out those numbers at the end of it? Worried about that you had enough spots to get in the guys that you wanted to get in. And Kirby Smart's like, listen, we've crunched every number. We know our scholarship situation. It is the salary cap, if you will, of college football. We weren't worried about that. We're just worried about finding the best players we can get. This is Kirby Smart from signing day. I think this is so appropriate.
No sweat numbers. I mean, we do the best we can to get the best players we can, and we do a real good job of evaluating them. We try to get every good football player we can that can make our program better, and that's our goal each and every year, is to upgrade that in character, academics, and on the football field.
The reason why I play that clip is because it's an important reminder for us when we get to like 2018 recruiting class. We just talked about positions where Georgia has needs. You may look around and say, well, there's some positions where Georgia doesn't have any needs at all. But then you're reminded, oh, yeah, what Kirby Smart said right there. They're always looking to get the best possible players available. That's also something that Jeff Sintel touched on when he joined us not too long ago on DawgNation Daily, when you think about the running back position for 2019, a spot where Georgia seemingly is pretty deep, but as always looking for more. Here's Jeff.
I think how much and how well Harrion plays and how well Holyfield plays and where do the freshmen Cook and White factor into the carry rotation. I think that's going to determine how big Georgia gets at the 2019 running back spot. They got 5 guys that should be under scholarship for 2019 as well. So I don't know if there's one name there that Georgia might get. Georgia is just going to be shopping, not out of necessity, but shopping out of luxury if they decide to add a running back out of the 2019 class.
When Jeff says one name they might get, he means adding one more running back for the class of 2019, given what's already there. And we find out, hey, if Georgia's shopping out of luxury, it's going to shoot for very high up on the list, including 4-star running back Noah Cain from IMG Academy, which visited Georgia over the weekend. Georgia doesn't need to add a running back, but there's a chance that if it can get a good one, it's still going to do that. Maybe Noah Cain, an example of that. I'd invite you to check out DawgNation.com here on this Monday. You know, the Centel Intel, Jeff's daily recruiting blog, actually posts at night now. Well, last night he posted a blog with 4-star running back Noah Cain from IMG Academy, fresh off his UGA visit, talking about what he liked about Athens. Check that out from Jeff Centel at DawgNation.com. But here for now on DawgNation Daily, let's get ready to enjoy Chip Towers. Good to have you with us.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
And we'll say hello to Chip Towers. Chip, hope you had a great weekend. It's good to have you with us here on DawgNation Daily. Always fun to have a conversation with you. And as I said, I hope you're coming off a terrific weekend. How are you today?
Yeah, weekends are great, aren't they? It was a great weekend. It was a beautiful weekend. At least part of it was, and you know, a lot of stuff happening as always. A really busy weekend in Athens with a bunch of live events. You know, gymnastics and baseball and basketball and women's basketball all going on, and it's really cool to live in this town. You know, this time of year because literally everything is going on. The only thing that's not going on right now, really, is football, and that's actually going on, as you know, and I know, indoors where those guys are pumping iron and running hard and all that kind of thing. So it's kind of out of view. But, yeah, every kind of competition you could think of was going on the UGA campus this weekend.
Yeah, that's kind of neat to think about. I do love this time of year for very much many of the same reasons that you just mentioned. And, you know, something that you wrote, going back to football here for a moment, at DawgNation.com this week, you know, I thought was kind of interesting. I guess it's been about a week ago now. You kind of looked at the need for Georgia at the linebacker position. Now, we just talked about that from a recruiting standpoint for 2019, but I want to talk to you about this on the field for 2018. And I think you and I are going to be very much of the same mind on this. And, you know, I think that Georgia's got the real quality names to sort of step in at outside linebacker. I think that DeAndre Walker could have a great season for Georgia. I think that Walter Grant's a really intriguing, good-looking prospect. I think he could have a great career at Georgia. But, man, that inside linebacker position where you have to replace Roquan Smith, Chip, that's where it gets just really, really tough. And I know you know this, and obviously our audience is up to speed on this. But for me, it's the number of solo tackles that Roquan, made last year. If Georgia's going to be just as productive on defense in 2018 as it was a season ago, you got to replace that kind of stuff. And while I see plenty of solid linebackers, I don't know that I see a superstar inside linebacker the way that Georgia enjoyed that for 2017. It sounds like you're very much in the same line of thought on that.
Well, there's two discussions I have when or things points I like to bring up when it comes to the discussion of Roquan Smith and Georgia's ability to replace him is first of all, there's the stats that you keep in football are basically tackles and sacks, and tackles for loss and that kind of stuff. And obviously everybody can see his tackles. They also, they have solo tackles, as you alluded to, and they have assists as well, which means you got in on a tackle. What's really not accounted for on somebody like Roquan Smith is the assist that he made without actually being involved in the tackle. And what I mean by that is I cannot tell you how many times I looked on tape and Roquan Smith getting outside of a perimeter play turned it inside where somebody else made the tackle. He was just so quick. I mean, we all know his speed. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see at the combine that we starts later this week. And I had a playful conversation with Roquan during the year about what his speed was. And he said he's a 4.5 guy, but he thinks he can. He's run a 4.4 before, and he thinks he can do it. If he runs a 4.4 at that combine this week, it is really going to turn some heads. But anyway, there's that quickness, and there's an anticipation of recognizing what they're doing on the offensive side of the ball that allows him to do that and turn the ball into other people. The other thing I also remind people of is a lot of people are pointing to, the recruits that Georgia's had at linebacker, and they have recruited greatly. But people forget Roquan Smith didn't come in as a true freshman and just light it up, and that's a guy who ended up as a Buckus Award candidate. And that's not to say anything of these other players. It's a difficult position. It's like, it's certainly like quarterback. There's no other position like quarterback, but, it's a position where it's not just reaction, but it is recognition, and that takes a while. So certainly Georgia has great, candidates at inside linebacker. We don't know how Natrez's situation is going to be handled. I mean, I do think he's going to be available to play in 2018, whether that's first game, second game, fourth game. I mean, we don't know, and we're probably not going to know anytime soon, and that helps you. But, you're pretty young at the position otherwise, and a lot of the people that a lot of the players that people are pointing at are very young. Monty Rice is a great player, was a great recruit, but he hasn't played a lot when it comes to that on-field recognition. Same with Nate McBride. I mean, he was on pretty much every special teams. Great player and all that kind of stuff, but it's the on-field stuff. And the other guys, Jawan Taylor and Tay Crowder, are they ready? I mean, I don't know. We'll see. We hadn't seen them enough on the field to be confident about the level at which they're going to play.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I mean, the question that a lot of our audience sometimes wants to ask is, hey, who's the next Roquan Smith? But, Chip, I think a better question might be, can Georgia have an elite defense in 2018 without a Roquan Smith? And I don't mean to disrespect any of the linebackers you just mentioned, but in terms of taking a big leap forward, that's just a very big leap to ask anyone to take. Can Georgia still be a great defense if there isn't someone who's compiling numbers and putting on a display of athleticism the way that Roquan Smith is? That actually may be the more relevant question for the Georgia defense here this upcoming season.
Yeah, I think you're right. And, well, here's the thing about it, too, is and Kirby's talked about this all the time. Roquan Smith was the perfect modern-day inside hybrid, linebacker from the standpoint of his ability to his ground coverage and pass skills and that kind of stuff. I mean, I really don't see a guy quite like that. Possibly Nate McBride. I mean, that guy still, his track stats blow me away. So we know he's really, really quick, and he looks like he's pretty tough and pretty physical as well. But, putting it all together as a sophomore, Roquan didn't quite. Now, I do believe you can operate without necessarily Butkus Award level play at inside linebacker, but a lot of that is kind of dependent on the defensive line, which I have some questions about too, certainly from a depth standpoint. I mean, I like Tyler Clark. I like Mikael Carter. I mean, I even like some of those young guys, but there's just not many of them. I mean, you got 4 nose guards on the roster. You got 4 defensive tackles on the roster. That's not a ton. I love Georgia's defensive ends, but it's just not a lot up there in the middle, and that's what you got to have to keep your linebackers free. Not everybody's going to be a world-class sprinter like Roquan is, but he's got to be able to keep blockers off of him to operate, and that, I think, what's going to really dictate how effective, I would put it, Georgia's inside linebacker play is going to be.
One of the things that Georgia fans have been talking about the most over the last probably 7 days or so is the letter that Sony Michel wrote in the Players Tribune about his thoughts, kind of coming off a career at the University of Georgia. Obviously, we'll be having a lot of these same kind of conversations at our upcoming DawgNation Appreciation on Thursday, March 15th at the Coca-Cola Roxy Theater. But what was your reaction to what you read from Sony? I mean, that's obviously a guy you've had a lot of conversations with over the years. You've told his story a lot in print here at DawgNation.com. What was your reaction to what Sony had for the Players Tribune?
Yeah, I mean, I was really blown away about it. I mean, I wrote about that on the Towers Take. I thought it was really cool. I liked the whole concept of the Players Tribune, which was actually, I didn't realize until I, did a little background research on it, was actually, founded and developed by Derek Jeter to sort of give athletes a forum of their own. And obviously, we saw Mohamed Massaquoi utilize that forum, and you saw Sony Michel do it as well. Sony is just, he's one of those guys. It's one of those guys that just falls in perfectly into that entire 2017 team, and the reason why the Georgia, the Bulldog Nation, got behind this team so much. There's so many guys like that, and that's not. I don't know if that was a perfect storm or what, but he's just a guy that you can fully appreciate when you even know. I mean, it doesn't even get into this, the Players Tribune thing, but when you really know his background, he's a first-generation Haitian American. His parents came over, and they basically, basically he ended up getting them a job at American Heritage. He's kind of lived off his football his entire life, and he just really appreciates that and really loved his time at Georgia. And I tell you, there is no greater recruiting tool than, the words of a player who came through there, was a fellow five-star, was steeped in difficult competition his entire time he was here, and yet, rewarded the fans and rewarded himself with all the opportunity that he got at Georgia. I thought it was great and really cool that Sony felt like sharing it. I know he's going to be a big hit at the Coca-Cola Roxy when we have that get together March 15th.
Let me bring this conversation, though, to something else you've kind of written about this week, or over the last week, because I'm a big believer in, Chip, maybe I'm naive about this, or there's a chance that I am, but, he kind of apologized in that letter for not winning the national championship, kind of not finishing off the season with the championship. And I'm a big believer that apology for him is not necessary in terms of the way that the 2017, Georgia team is going to be remembered. I don't think it's going to be remembered negatively at all. I think it's going to be remembered fondly. I do believe that Georgia's heading towards a brighter future, which is obviously not guaranteed, but I do believe there are bright, days ahead. And I sort of think the stair step to getting there is what Georgia went through in 2017. If you'll allow a comparison, I don't think this is the Falcons being up 28-3 to the New England Patriots and kind of coughing up that Super Bowl. I don't think that's what this is, but as I said, there's a chance that I'm naive and that one day I'm going to look back on this and realize how close Georgia was and not able to get it done. I mean, I know you've written about this a lot over the last 7 days, but kind of where do you come down on that?
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely, and I pointed that out too after reading Sony thing. It's like, Sony, I don't think that's a necessary thing for the apology, but that which we saw a year was 85, 90 players, competing, their butts off till they just didn't have an ounce of energy left. And at the end of the day, that's all you can say. That, despite all the bad calls, and we've gone over that ad nauseum, and Georgia was the victim of some rotten calls. The outcome of that game was a personnel issue, more than anything else. And I think it was a great measuring stick for Georgia, and not just for the players and coaches, but for the fans as well. I mean, you kind of see what it takes, both in support, which Kirby is, beating that tom hard, and then the effort that it takes. Not only do you have to have great players, 5 stars and 4 stars scattered all over the field, but you just, the level of concentration and effort it takes to get through a gauntlet like that, once you just, if you can even get to the postseason, is incredible. So I thought it was a great learning curve, and I tend to be, I think Georgia has a great schedule ahead of them, and I think they've recruited fantastic. I'm a little bit skittish about saying that Georgia can get back right away next season, because some of the reasons we alluded to is just, it feels very transitional to me, just the last year to this year. But there's just a lot of ground to make up. Can it be done? Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Yeah, you can plug, some new names into all those positions and get the same result. But I'm telling you what, that was a perfect storm in a lot of ways last season. It's going to be hard to recapture that.
You wrote about Georgia, Florida, in Jacksonville this week. That came up on DawgNation Daily a little bit this week, too. And you and I have talked about this before. I don't want to relitigate everything we've ever said about this in the past, but just to bring everybody up to speed, and then I want to get a specific thought from you. As a fan, I love this game in Jacksonville. I think it's one of the cool traditions in all college football. My preference would be for it not to go away. I agree with your analysis of this, and you've written about this and spoken about this many times, is that in the sort of like foreseeable future, many, many years into the future, this game's not departing from Jacksonville. I believe that you're right about that for all the reasons that you've listed. But what came up on our show last week was a couple of things. A, Chip, I think dissatisfaction with the kind of games against Austin Peay and Middle Tennessee State, things like that, is at an all-time high. I think a lot of Georgia fans, like a lot of other college football fans, have grown really tired of these kinds of games. And B, I think that Kirby Smart would like to have the extra home game to recruit every other year, because with the game being in Jacksonville, you're missing out on that opportunity because they're not going to entertain recruits on a neutral site game. There's not a huge advantage to necessarily doing that. So if I'm right that Kirby Smart doesn't love it in Jacksonville and that fans are getting a little irritated with the state of the home schedule, does that change the motivation for Georgia at all if those two things happen to be true?
Well, I happen to be, I've just been around so long, I guess you could say, and knowing what Georgia is kind of grandfathered in like Texas and Oklahoma is on even being able to have a game like this, a regular season conference matchup at a neutral site. They're not going to make any more of those. And believe me, with Kirby, it's all about recruiting. I mean, it's all about how does this affect recruiting, and if it lessens his opportunities, for the most part, he's not going to be for it. But the branding opportunity and the reach of that game that it gives you annually, I think, easily outweighs whatever you can do with a recruit coming in and visiting you. I mean, Georgia, whatever weekends whatever weekend that falls on, there's plenty of other weekends that you can bring in whatever recruit that you need. And there's ways that they can talk. I mean, there's ways they do use it that particular weekend. I mean, you talk to recruits on Friday. A lot of them make their way to that game, by the way. They have to pay their own way, but they tend to make it down there for that because they want to see what it's all about. And that's kind of what Georgia coaches do. They tell them, hey, we can't host you, but if you can find any way to get down there, you need to get a look at this firsthand because it's completely different in the stands than it is on the field. And when you're on the field, that's really, really special. But over and beyond all that, the monetary, the financial, the branding and public relations weight of that game is heavy, heavy, heavy. And I don't think people, Georgia fans are kind of jaded to it. I mean, you're used to it. It happens all the time. I could go to Jacksonville or not. But it's really, and they're the same way as Texas, Oklahoma, but it's a really, really special opportunity. Now, the other thing you're talking about, I agree 100%. I hate schedules like the ones they have coming up next year. I mean, you have a playoff now. My personal opinion, and it's not going to happen anytime soon, is you need to reduce the regular season and you need to increase the playoff to 8 teams and reduce the regular season to 11 games or 10 games. Because let's face it, nobody is getting excited about the Austin Peay game. Middle Tennessee doesn't get anybody excited. Yeah, it's an opportunity to come to Georgia and sit in Sanford Stadium and check out the new changes to the West End and tailgate with your friends and all that. But when it comes to the competition, there's a lot of money pouring in to college football and the SEC network, and you don't need to dupe people for their money. They're paying a lot of good money to be there, and I think you need to give them an entertainment product that's worth coming out for. So drop 1 or 2 of those games, reduce it. Maybe you go back all the way to 10 games. I don't know, and increase the playoffs a little bit. I don't know if that'll happen anytime soon, but I think that's what needs to happen.
So much more we could talk about, Chip, including some interesting comments from Mark Fox this weekend, but our time is gone. I've kept you long as it is. I look forward to reading a bunch from you at DawgNation.com this week, and we'll have you back here on DawgNation Daily really soon as well, too.
We'll see you there.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
And just to explain what Chip was talking about there at the end when it comes to the Georgia-Florida, the reason why I asked him about that in relationship to the scheduling, by playing the neutral site game in Jacksonville every year, you run yourself in a situation where, if you were to also play another elite non-conference game, you could get stuck only having 5 home games during a year, which is not only, tough for the overall bottom line for Georgia athletics, but it'd be just a crippling blow to a lot of the local Athens economy, bars, restaurants, parking garages, everything that sort of, hopes to make money off Georgia football. That's that issue there. There is a certain extent to which I've always been very pro Jacksonville. I like going to the beach. I love Amelia Island. I like St. Simon's Island. I like hanging out a little bit at the beach, kind of leading up to the start of the game there. I even don't hate downtown Jacksonville if you can kind of do it the right way. I mean, I don't mind that. I think that's a really fun, special venue for college football. But I'm also starting to hear from a lot more people who have strong dislike towards playing the Austin Peays and the kinds of games that don't get you excited. And it seems to me that you can't have both. You can have Georgia, Florida, and Jacksonville, and the home schedule the way it's currently constituted, at least based on the current economy of college football. But if you want better home games more often, that means Georgia, Florida has to also become a home-and-home deal as well, at least the best that I can crunch the numbers. Nonetheless, let's do our SEC through here, and let me start with what I think is a pretty serious story. And a lot of times, I like to sort of crack wise at the expense of Georgia's rivals and, kind of have some fun with bad news for teams that Georgia have to play every year. I am not going to do that in this case because I really hate this for this young man. One of the best players in all of college football is the rising sophomore left tackle for the Tennessee Vols, Trey Smith, a guy that I had a chance to get to know a little bit on the recruiting trail going back to the class of 2017. Had a chance to interview Trey at the Touchdown Club of Atlanta event 2 years ago. And this is a super guy, a terrific player. And right now, there's a medical issue kind of hanging over his head a bit. He's going to miss spring practice, and we've heard a lot of guys recently missing spring practice across the SEC for various reasons. To me, this does not feel like that because this is involving a second opinion. Medical issues here are a little bit scarce. I'm sure there's no shortage of rumors. I won't get into any of that because I frankly don't even know what to say about that. But right now, one of the top players for Tennessee, one of the top players for the SEC, is going to miss spring practice, and his return to football is uncertain here. This is a big-time blow for the Vols. This is the last thing Jeremy Pruitt needs getting his career started. And, frankly, even though he plays for one of Georgia's rivals, we wish Trey Smith well because we're very, very respectful of his game here on DawgNation Daily. On a different subject, thought that Booger McFarland had an interesting comment being interviewed on the Feinbaum show the other day. He was relaying a conversation secondhand that he had with Texas A&M coach Jimbo Fisher, and he basically said to Jimbo, this is all coming from Booger McFarland on the Feinbaum show. He's like, Coach, I hate to tell you, I think your team's soft. And by your team, he means the team that Jimbo Fisher inherited. And he said, I don't mean any disrespect to Kevin Sumlin on this, but blah, 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 blah. A&M's kind of a soft team. And Jimbo, according to Booger McFarland, agreed with that and said, we're here to change that. Now, I think it's really funny if this conversation does go down the way that Booger McFarland says that it does. I have no reason to disbelieve him, but you know how hearsay goes. That's one of the reasons why hearsay is not acceptable in a court of law. People have a tendency to sort of, it's like a telephone game. What Jimbo said exactly what Booger McFarland sort of relayed it to be? Well, we don't really know about that, but the overall point here, though, I do believe is true. I do believe that Texas A&M has been soft. I've made the case on SEC Country Live why I kind of think that is the way that it is, and I do believe that Jimbo Fisher is probably going to be able to fix that. He's going to value defense more than Kevin Sumlin did, and frankly more than virtually anybody in the state of Texas does. So I think that's probably worth pointing out and seeing how that plays out. By the way, speaking of A&M, they are pushing for 100,000 plus for their spring game, just like Georgia wanted the full stadium for Kirby's first year. Tim Brewster on Twitter kind of doing the same thing, so we'll see if the Aggies get there on that. And then, to start the show, I kind of mentioned maybe some whining comments from Nick Saban on Friday's show. Alabama fans unhappy that we kind of brought that up here on DawgNation Daily. Well, Saban doing the same thing again. 24/7 Sports quotes him from a coaches convention, and he's got talking about all the players they're losing. They got 15 guys in the combine. That's more than anybody else. And boy, a lot of whining coming from Saban lately. You wonder if there's some cracks in the facade here. If the top program in college football, maybe Saban's feeling a little uneasy on that foundation at the moment. We'll see and have more on this on SEC Country Live this afternoon. And for now, we'll make that your SEC through. With Chip Towers a little earlier in the show, I mentioned the Mark Fox deal. He had some pretty pointed comments about the NCAA scandal hanging over college basketball. I don't really know what to say about this. I'm going to talk more about this in the Daily Double today. You can check that out at forum.dawgnation.com. We'll also have a link for it on our show page. We post the audio here for dawgnation.com. Fox's basic premise here is college basketball is dirty. We've been doing it clean, and I'm proud that we are. I'm almost like Switzerland on this issue. I'm curious what Georgia fans think. Are they proud of Georgia for being as different as apparently the rest of college basketball is when it comes to these player issues? Hit me up on Twitter at DawgNation Daily or put a comment in the comment section at Facebook. I'll also tell you 243 days from right now, Georgia goes back to Jacksonville, beats Florida again. It's our Gator Hater Countdown here on DawgNation Daily, and get your tickets for DawgNation Appreciation at DawgNation.com. We'll see you tomorrow. And for those of you here on the video side of things, I don't want to overwhelm our discussion with the basketball stuff because I know most of you don't want to talk about that. But I guess I would be curious if you do want to weigh in on that part of it. I have a hard time getting as like emotionally invested in the sense of pride of, hey, my favorite college basketball team, they're doing it clean. Arizona's paying guys $100,000. Georgia's not. I don't know. I'm sort of like, I guess, apathetic about that. I'm apathetic about the cheating. I think that college basketball players are worth money. I think their talent has an inherent value which is, connected to money. That's not a big deal to me. The fact that Georgia was doing things clean, or at least that's the appearance anyway. What does that really mean to me? I don't know. I don't have a strong sense of passion about that one side or the other. I need to hear what some of y'all think about it. Rick Martin says Mark Vaught needs to stop talking about other teams and learn to recruit and coach his own team. It'll be a travesty if UGA keeps him. Yeah. So ultimately, here's what I think is going to happen with this NCAA thing. I think it's all just going to go away. I just think there's a lot of saber rattling right now. A lot of, blue check brigade, super serious reporters have kind of done their, very serious reporting on this. But the truth is, this could have been written a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever. If the FBI wasn't coming out with their deal, the reporters wouldn't be, doing this, right now. At least that's my opinion on that. And it's all going to lead to nothing. Because if you truly follow this story, everywhere it would eventually go, it essentially means that college basketball is just going to disappear. And, the clean program, so to speak, there'll be nobody left for them to play. And listen, nobody wants, within the circle of the sport, nobody wants it to go away. The people that cover it don't want it to disappear. The programs that make money off it don't want it to disappear. Then, ultimately, this is the only way for the sport to survive is for all this to sort of just quietly get resolved or get sort of wrapped up in so much like legal mumbo jumbo that the average, person, the public by and large, just, forgets about it. That's the way all this kind of stuff goes down. Watch the way the North Carolina academic scandal got handled, dragged out over time. And by the time that it was resolved, nothing was resolved. There was essentially no punishment to speak of whatsoever because you're not taking down a blue blood basketball program. Well, here you'd be essentially taking down all the blue blood basketball programs, the programs that essentially make up the NCAA tournament every single year. They are not, giving those programs a de facto death penalty. They're just not. So eventually nothing's going to come of this. And so the sort of like, back patting in vain of, hey, look how clean our program is. That's going to seem even more spitting in the wind or whatever, because ultimately the programs who are doing it wrong, I don't think are going to face any kind of serious punishment for this, or there's not going to be any kind of, really satisfying resolution to this for the people who want basketball to be cleanly. I hate to be so cynical about it, but that's just kind of the way that I think it is. Rick Martin says NCAA's not going to do anything about it. There's too much money involved. Stacy Hidman, to bring it back to football, says, let me get Stacy's comment. I'm really excited about UG football, but we recruited better than Alabama for only one cycle. I hope this is the start of a Georgia dynasty. And I think Stacy brings up a really good point there. Obviously there are some things in place that make the 2019 class look potentially pretty good for Georgia. But it is important to note that, Georgia out-recruited, as Stacy said, out-recruited Alabama for one cycle. It's going to happen again. Georgia's not going to beat Alabama on the field regularly. They may, knock it off once or twice. But regular wins against Alabama in SEC championship games or were they to rematch in the college football playoff again, those kinds of things are not going to happen unless Georgia is also regularly out-recruiting Alabama. We're off to a good start in that regard. But as Stacy says, that's got to continue. I think that's exactly right. Let me go down and get a few more here. Greg Perlago says, how about with better cornerbacks, Georgia starts to blitz more? Obviously referencing Tyson Campbell and DeAndre Baker. That's certainly a thought. We've seen other SEC teams do that. I still think that Kirby Smart and Mel Tucker are of the philosophy that it's better to generate pass rush with something else other than a blitz. I think that's a philosophy they believe strongly in. But yeah, listen, better cornerbacks give you a lot of freedom to do a lot of other things as well. Gregory Nowak, to go back to basketball for a second, says basketball analysts and so-called basketball journalists have been a mum for years because they are eating from the same gravy train as all the cheaters and corrupt programs. There's an extent to which that I kind of agree with that, Gregory. And by the way, there's also this belief that I think is sort of baked into the system of who cares that the players are getting money. I mean, that's the other part of this as well, is that if you are a player that's good enough to go to the NBA, then your basketball talent is worth money. And, this notion that it's somehow corrupt to give the players who have the talent some of that money, I mean, by and large, most of America doesn't agree with that. Maurice Carter sounds like Nick Saban is losing sleep over this last recruiting class and the fact that Kirby's closing in on shutting Alabama's dynasty down. It's not going to be long before it happens. Yeah, I would think there's a chance that Saban's getting a little nervous here. I mean, listen, no one wants to see what they've had come to an end. And I'm not telling you that what Saban's had's ending tomorrow. I mean, he's still a formidable foe. I mean, please hear me when I say this, that on the field this season, Alabama's still probably a tick more talented than Georgia is. So, with everything that Georgia has done, all it's done is sort of work its way up to being equal to Alabama. Kirby Smart is a young lion. He's not going anywhere anytime soon. And, the 60-plus-year-old Saban, I don't know that you can say the same thing for his energy level. I mean, part of the issue here for Alabama recruiting has been guys like Kirby Smart and guys like Jeremy Pruitt have sort of been their own source of energy for the program. Saban almost, outsourcing the energy from the guys below him on the food chain there. How long was that possible to work? Energy's got to be dictated from the guy in charge, from the person in charge, if you'll allow. I think that Nick Saban is maybe having a hard time matching the energy that guys like Jeremy Pruitt and Kirby Smart are showing on their recruiting trail. Jimbo Fisher, too, maybe, who's going to cut from that same cloth. One-time Saban assistant. I think don't discount Jimbo making things hard on Saban. Sort of, Kirby's his issue sort of east of Tuscaloosa, west of Tuscaloosa. Jimbo's a grizzly bear to deal with. Carl Barr says there's no excuse for all the cheating in basketball. The playing field needs to be level. If kids can go to the NBA out of high school, good luck to them. So, all right, that's fine. But here's the issue, though. If you take all the NBA-style talent, NBA-ready talent out of college basketball, I mean, maybe that is what needs to happen. Maybe it is just sort of unseemly that there's a cap put on when these guys go to the NBA. But you're ending college basketball. I mean, look at all the college sports that don't have the top, flight athletes. There's certain sports where the track is not to go to college, it's to go, somewhere else. Look at those sports where the majority of the elite talent doesn't play college sports. Ask yourself how popular those sports are. And then ask yourself, if you care about college basketball at all, do you want to see the talent that it does exist there sort of taken from it? At that point in time, you got to wonder why we even have these games on TV anymore. Let me get a few more here. Jarvis Hanna says, what do you think Sony Michel and Nick Chubb are going to run at the Combine? I don't know. I would imagine they both have pretty good times. I think that Nick Chubb's going to be especially motivated because I think he wants to show, how recovered he is from the injury. Listen, these draft guys, the guys on TV and, the sort of real scouts behind the scene, they love coming up with reasons why not to draft a guy. Well, my least favorite thing in all of sports, and I've said this before, and this is kind of a very brief tangent. My least favorite thing in all of sports is the NFL draft. Because when you watch draft coverage, the only way that draft talkers on TV can sort of seem to find a way to make themselves sound smart is to sort of talk about everything that's wrong with a guy. You'll hear it, well, he's this and he's that. Watch out for this. A lot of red flags. There's a lot of potential disqualifications, and there's almost too much of that. And you're going to hear a lot of that with Nick Chubb during the Combine and then heading into the draft. And ultimately, he's going to be drafted and he's going to have a fine career. But there's going to be a lot brought up by that 2015 injury. Even though that, Chubb, even if he wasn't quite as explosive as he once was, he still came back and had a really strong 2016 and I thought a terrific 2017. But you're still going to hear some of that. You're going to hear a lot of that. So I think he's going to be especially motivated at the Combine because of that. And my guess is you see him do something really, really big. Richard Smith says that's the reason why Saban's crying. He knows he's going to continue to lose the recruiting battle. Yeah, I mean, listen, if he loses it in 2018 and he loses in 2019, at that point in time, you got to wonder if they're ever getting it back. If it becomes up for grabs for somebody else. And, it's not just Alabama, Georgia dealing with here. You got Ohio State out there that's tough to deal with. You got Clemson that's not going anywhere. But if Alabama goes 2 years in a row without having the number one recruiting class, you got to wonder if it's ever going to happen again under Saban. Lee Allen Wells says, by sweeping it under the rug, the basketball stuff, how does it look to our children? It's a fair question. I guess you have to ask yourself also is, are you scandalized by players getting money? Remember, this is not something that I would say that the majority of the public even views as immoral. So I guess it depends on what your own personal morality code here is. Santiago D. Yarn says, if Chaney, if Georgia were to fire Chaney, would Sam Pittman leave too? First of all, I think that Jim Chaney's probably on pretty solid footing right now. I think Chaney had a pretty good year in 2017. But yes, I do think that the Chaney and Pittman relationship, my understanding is that's a pretty close one based on what people have said when they come here on DawgNation Daily, that Chaney and Pittman have a pretty good relationship. And Pittman would maybe feel a little less tied to Georgia if he didn't have an offensive coordinator that he enjoyed having a close working relationship with, which I think he does have with Jim Chaney. Daniel Goldsmith says that Bama's going to go away overnight as soon as Nick Saban steps down. It's not going to be long. Listen, replacing any coach is always a difficult issue here. You look at the elite coaches that have been in place a long time. The succession plans behind all those guys can be pretty difficult. So I think you're right. Wayne Folan says, one of our emoji experts over there may need to help me. I believe that is a curling emoji. I believe that is a curling, what do they call those? Stones. I believe that's a curling stone emoji. I think that's a reference by Wayne to say if you're going to talk about basketball, you might as well talk about curling. A lot of folks kind of weighing in on this. Some of you don't want me to talk about the basketball stuff. I totally get that. We have to get ready to get out of here in a minute anyway. Michael Morrow says, enjoyed the positive spin on the new wide receivers coach, Cortez Hankton. Derek Mason speaks highly of him. Yeah, to me, Cortez Hankton's a little bit like Trey Scott was in that this is not a guy that has like some long resume. Not every of the 10 coaches you get to hire, and this is especially true now that there's 10, when there used to only be 9, now that there are 10 on-field coaches, they're not all going to be sort of dream team guys with the resume as long as my arm. Some of these guys are going to be up-and-comers, and the best coaches are going to do the best job of sort of identifying who the best up-and-comers are. And it sounds like in the case of Cortez Hankton, Georgia may have gotten themselves a good one. But that is the issue. You got to look at a guy whose resume may be a little bit thin, but you've got to sort of judge his energy. You got to judge his acumen. You got to judge his ability to sort of be insatiable on the recruiting trail, and apparently that's what Kirby thinks he sees in Hankton there. Randy Hall says A&M's going to be a beast soon. They're going to recruit really well. Yeah, I think they will be. It's not an issue for Georgia because Georgia doesn't play Texas A&M until like 2030 or something like that. But as it stands right now, I think A&M's going to be pretty good eventually here. So really good comments. Sorry we don't have time for more of them today. We'll try to make sure we have more time for more comments tomorrow. I've got to run for right now. We'll have the show posted at DawgNation.com. For those of you who want more of the basketball stuff, we'll have the Daily Double up for you as well, the DawgNation Daily Double, both at the forum at forum.DawgNation.com and when we post the show page at DawgNation.com. And for those of you that want none of it whatsoever, that's why we're putting it there, at least so you don't have to hear that during the regular broadcast. We try to make as many people happy as we can here on DawgNation Daily. We'll see at 3 p.m. Let me try that one more time. We'll see at 3 p.m. this afternoon for SEC Country Live on the SEC Country Facebook page. I'll be back in tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for another episode of DawgNation Daily Live. Y'all have a good day, and we'll talk to you then.